All right, let's dive deep into some serious international politics.
Buckle up.
We're going way beyond those headlines you see, getting right into the minds of some of the most powerful people on the planet.
Absolutely.
Our guide for this wild ride is Bob Woodward and his book, War.
Oh, yeah. He's giving us that fly-on-the-wall view, of all the major recent events, Ukraine war, the Israel-Gaza conflict.
The real deal.
Through these crazy, revealing interactions with leaders, Presidents Biden, Putin, Zelensky, even Trump were going there, and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
No holds barred.
It's all there.
So, are you ready to unpack all of this?
It's an incredible chance to understand not just what happened, the events themselves, but the personalities.
Yeah.
The personalities driving them, the decisions made behind closed doors, like what were they thinking?
Right, and the ripple effect.
Oh, absolutely. Fell all over the world.
So our mission, if you choose to accept it,
I do.
is to give you that deeper understanding, a nuanced understanding of these events, moving beyond just the sound bites. To give you a sense of what's really going on behind the scenes.
Those forces at play.
Exactly, the forces at play.
Powerful stuff.
Let's start with Trump.
Okay.
Woodward actually had his first encounter with him way back in 1989.
Long time ago.
Long before politics.
Before The Apprentice.
Before The Apprentice, exactly. Long before.
What's fascinating is those early interviews, like you said, 89.
Yeah.
They tell you so much about him.
They really do.
And it becomes so relevant later.
It's like foreshadowing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Like a preview of the Trump we see later on the world stage. And some of the things he says are just wild.
Wild.
Yeah.
Eye-opening. Yeah, like when Woodward asks him about his closest friends.
Right.
And Trump starts listing all these high-profile businessmen, and Woodward and his colleague are like, we don't know these guys.
No idea.
And then he says something that really, like you said, gets to the heart of how he sees the world.
He says he wants to test their loyalty, his friends, spread a rumor that he's broke, financially ruined, just for a week, just to see who sticks around.
That's intense.
Very transactional.
It really is. Very transactional view of relationships.
It makes you wonder.
Yeah, almost like he's always sizing people up,
What can they do for me?
What can they do for me, exactly?
Yeah.
And then there's another anecdote where he's bragging about not paying fines for building violations in Brooklyn.
Oh, yeah, those unfounded fines.
Yeah, unfounded, he calls them.
He's got that approach with the inspector. It's like a game to him.
It's a game.
Delaying, challenging them every step of the way.
Yeah. He even says,
He boasts.
from day one, I said, expletive them.
Oh, yeah, deep defiance of authority.
Like rules are for other people.
Exactly.
And that kind of defiance, that attitude.
It takes us right to Putin.
Yes, it does.
Trump's relationship with Putin.
Yeah, Woodward reveals that Trump had this, soft spot for Putin.
Oh, he admired him, his power, especially those nukes.
Those nukes, yeah.
It's like Russia's nuclear arsenal, it made Putin somebody to admire, not fear.
It's almost like he respected that destructive potential.
Yeah, he even says it.
I know the quote.
He's like, getting along with Russia, it's a good thing, okay? Not bad, especially because they have 1,332 nuclear effing warheads.
And
they work.
And they work.
Like, he's impressed.
He's impressed by them, yeah.
So he respects Putin's power.
Clearly.
But then he also claims to be tough on Russia.
Right.
How does that work?
Yeah, how does that square?
It's like this weird disconnect
You know-
between what he feels and what he says about Russia publicly.
Yeah.
It's one of the most confusing parts of his foreign policy.
It really is.
What was he really thinking?
Makes you wonder what was driving his actions.
Oh.
And a prime example of this
Oh, yeah.
is that 2018 Helsinki summit
With Putin.
with Putin, where Trump publicly sides with Putin.
Over his own intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
About Russian interference in the 2016 election.
Shocking.
Shocking. It was a huge turning point, I think. It shook a lot of people's confidence in him.
It really did.
In his judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have Trump, often impulsive.
Right.
Then you have Biden,
Yeah, very different.
more deliberate, more intelligence-driven.
Totally different approach.
And a key figure,
Jake Sullivan.
Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, very meticulous guy.
Woodward describes him as meticulous, even calls him,
A once-in-a-lifetime intellect.
yeah, he's like the architect of Biden's foreign policy.
Shaping the strategy.
And a key element of that strategy.
Intelligence gathering.
Yeah, and sharing it.
When Russia started amassing troops on the Ukrainian border,
Right.
they were already working behind the scenes.
Trying to figure out Putin.
What's he going to do?
What's his game plan?
And how do we respond?
But it wasn't just gathering intel.
They decided to declassify some of it.
Wow.
share it with the world, highly sensitive stuff.
Why would they do that?
It was a gamble,
A big one.
but it was calculated
So they're exposing Russia's plans.
to try and stop them from spinning a false narrative.
Get ahead of it.
Rally international support for Ukraine, and hopefully deter Putin from invading in the first place.
It's like a preemptive strike, but with information.
Exactly. Information warfare.
And this intel, it was so detailed.
Troop movements.
Yeah.
Plans for a false flag operation.
Wow.
To justify the invasion, they even had a kill list
A kill?
of Ukrainians they wanted to eliminate.
Sure.
Really chilling stuff.
What impact did this have?
I think revealing the kill list was a turning point.
It's hard to ignore that.
It really was. There was no doubt about how serious things were.
It's real.
It galvanized international support for Ukraine.
Wow. So it had the intended effect.
Absolutely.
And it put Zelensky on high alert.
Even though he didn't want to believe it at first.
Right. He was skeptical.
He got assurances from some European leaders that Putin wouldn't actually invade.
So he's getting mixed messages.
And then the U.S. is like, hey, we got this kill list with your name on it.
Talking about pressure.
Imagine being in that position.
Yeah, impossible.
Choose between preparing for the worst or risking being totally caught off guard.
A tough call.
Meanwhile, Biden's talking to Putin directly,
Tense phone calls.
trying to talk him down.
Didn't he even offer to meet with Putin in person?
Yeah, in June 2022, hoping to give Putin a way out, de-escalate things,
Wow.
but it didn't work.
It didn't work, and in February 2022,
An invasion.
Russian troops crossing the border into Ukraine.
Shocking for a lot of people.
But the Biden administration, they had been preparing for this.
They had a plan.
Months of groundwork, a coordinated response, ready to go.
And this is where you see that stark contrast with Trump.
Oh yeah, total opposite.
Biden's working to prevent war.
And Trump's praising Putin's invasion as genius.
What was going on there?
Hard to say,
Confusing.
especially after all that tough on Russia talk.
Right.
Maybe he was trying to look strong.
Aligning himself with Putin, another strong man.
Could be, or maybe.
Maybe he genuinely admired Putin's tactics.
Yeah, like he didn't care about international law or anything. Just pure power moves
Whatever it was, it shows that deep divide in American politics.
when it comes to Russia.
And as the war went on, Trump's comments just got weirder.
Yeah.
Like he was trying to have it both ways, praising Putin and saying it wouldn't have happened under him.
Confusing for his supporters.
And it undermines efforts to present a united front against Russia.
It really does.
Undermines the whole thing.
So the U.S. is divided.
And Biden's team is trying to manage this international crisis.
Yeah, rally support, coordinate a response.
Talk about a headache.
A major headache.
Adds another layer of complexity.
It really does, to an already tense situation.
Yeah.
Okay, we've seen the differences between Biden and Trump.
Night and day.
But what about how Biden's team actually functioned during this crisis?
Well, Woodward paints this picture of a really collaborative team,
Okay.
with Biden relying heavily on Blinken and Sullivan.
Yeah, those were his key guys.
And there was a lot of debate, internal debate about how to handle things.
We weren't all on the same page.
Not always, no. Some were more hawkish, some more cautious.
So different perspectives.
But they were all united in their commitment to supporting Ukraine
That's
and
good.
deterring Russia.
The main goal.
Right.
Woodward even tells this story about Blinken acting as a sort of marriage counselor.
Trying to smooth things over.
Yeah, helping them navigate those disagreements and find common ground.
It's a sign of maturity, you know? Self-awareness within the administration.
They knew they needed those different perspectives.
To craft effective policy, especially in a crisis like that.
Makes sense.
And this approach was crucial in some of the key moments of the war.
Like the battle at Hostomel Airport.
Right outside Kiev,
It was a bold move by the Russians,
trying to seize that strategic asset.
potentially leading to a quick capture of the capital.
But the Ukrainians fought back hard.
They did.
Inflicted heavy losses on the Russians, stopped them from taking the airport.
A big win for
A
Ukraine
major victory. It showed their determination.
and their tactical skills.
They were not messing around.
What did this battle reveal about the bigger picture?
I think it shattered that myth of Russian military invincibility.
They weren't invincible after all.
They had weaknesses in their planning, their execution.
And that sent a message to the West.
Ukraine could actually win this thing.
They were worth supporting.
And that support came pouring in.
Weapons, intelligence, economic aid.
All of it crucial in helping Ukraine resist.
But there was debate within the Biden administration about what to send, how much, how fast.
They were worried about provoking Putin.
Starting a bigger war.
It was like walking a tightrope.
Trying to give Ukraine enough to defend itself.
Without triggering World War III.
Exactly.
And as the war dragged on and the Ukrainians showed they could use the weapons effectively.
The West stepped up.
Heavier weapons, more advanced systems.
They were committed.
Long-term commitment to supporting Ukraine.
A Ukrainian victory was essential.
To contain Russia.
And this support had a real impact.
Absolutely. They slowed the Russian advance, inflicted those heavy losses, and eventually pushed them back.
Yeah, but the war was far from over.
And the human cost was already enormous.
Devastating.
Cities destroyed, millions displaced, countless lives lost.
Wars aren't just political games.
They have a real impact on people.
Families torn apart, communities destroyed.
Scars that last for generations.
And while the fighting was going on, there was another war happening.
The intelligence war?
Oh, right. Tell me about that.
The Biden administration was getting all this top-secret intel.
Like a constant stream.
Painting a picture of Russia, their plans, their strengths, their weaknesses.
Like they were inside Putin's head.
Almost. It was more than just trip movements.
Okay.
They learned about the Kremlin, the dynamics between Putin and his advisors.
Wow.
The state of their economy, troop morale.
All of it.
A mosaic of sources: human intelligence, signals intelligence, satellite imagery, cyber espionage.
Like a spy thriller.
It really is like
Yeah.
having that window into the enemy's mind.
But knowing what to do with all that intel.
That's the key.
And they made the decision to declassify some of it.
Release it to the public.
Controversial move.
Oh, absolutely. Some people thought it would compromise sources and methods.
Hurt future intelligence gathering.
But they felt the benefits outweighed the risks.
And what were those benefits?
It galvanized the international community.
Okay.
More support for Ukraine, more pressure on Russia.
Sanctions, diplomatic isolation.
And it allowed the U.S. to counter Russian propaganda.
A fight back with the truth.
Present a clear picture of what was really happening.
So they used intelligence as a weapon.
In a way, yeah, a tool of diplomacy and deterrence.
It's a whole new kind of warfare.
Information warfare, and it's changing everything.
Makes you wonder about the future of intelligence.
How do we balance secrecy and transparency?
How do we protect national security without betraying democratic values?
Tough questions.
Questions for the 21st century.
Definitely.
But let's move on to another major global event that Woodward covers. The Israel-Gaza war.
A whole new set of challenges.
Brutal conflict.
It really tested Biden's diplomatic skills.
You had to walk a fine line.
Supporting Israel, a close ally under attack,
Right.
but also trying to prevent a wider conflict.
In a very volatile region.
Exactly, a diplomatic tightrope.
So how did he handle it?
Well, one of the first things he did was reach out to Netanyahu,
Prime Minister of Israel.
offered support, expressed solidarity.
Those two have a long history.
Decades, and it hasn't always been easy.
No, not always.
But in this crisis, Biden put those differences aside.
Put the relationship first.
He made it clear that the U.S. stood with Israel.
Their right to defend themselves.
But he also wanted a balanced approach.
What does that mean?
He was worried about things escalating,
Okay.
civilian casualties, and the need to address those underlying issues that keep fueling the conflict.
It's not just about the immediate crisis.
No, it's about trying to find a lasting peace.
So Biden's trying to balance support for Israel
With the need to prevent a bigger war.
and address the concerns of both sides.
It's a tough job.
It's a really tough job.
And it's one that we'll dig into more in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, sounds good. We've covered a lot in this first part.
A lot of ground.
We've looked at the personalities of Trump and Biden,
Very different personality.
their approaches to foreign policy, the role of intelligence in shaping their decisions.
And how domestic politics can influence things on a global scale.
Right. Even the most powerful leaders are limited by the world they operate in.
It's a complex web.
And we'll continue untangling that web in the next part of our deep dive, exploring the Israel-Gaza war in more detail, looking inside the Biden administration, and considering the long-term impact of these events.
The future of the world.
Exactly, the future of the world.
So, yeah, the Israel-Gaza war, real high-stakes diplomacy for Biden.
A real test.
He's got a close ally under attack, but got to prevent a wider conflict.
In a really tough region.
Yeah, super volatile.
Like walking a tightrope.
Right. Exactly. Support for Israel, but also concerns about the Palestinians.
And the risk of it all blowing up.
Escalation, that's the big fear.
And what does Woodward tell us about how Biden handled this?
Well, he had real concerns about Netanyahu, specifically his plans for a ground invasion of Gaza.
Oh, wow.
Biden gets it, the domestic pressure Netanyahu's
Guess
under.
it looked tough.
But a ground invasion could be a humanitarian catastrophe.
Yeah, a whole other level.
So Biden, he's working behind the scenes, trying to persuade Netanyahu to hold back.
Be more cautious.
At the same time, he's working on getting humanitarian aid into Gaza
Making sure people are taken care of.
and trying to keep the conflict contained.
Stop it from spreading.
It's like a giant chess game.
With really high stakes.
Absolutely. You've got other players too, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all trying to influence the outcome.
They all have their interests.
And Biden's dealing with domestic pressure too.
Right, the pro-Israel lobby in the U.S.
Powerful force.
So international pressure, domestic pressure, a conflict with no easy answers.
Yeah. That's the reality of being president.
What does this all tell us about Biden as a leader?
Woodward portrays him as, even with all this pressure, staying calm, deliberate, focused on finding a solution to stop the bloodshed.
Level-headed.
And he's not afraid to push back against Netanyahu, even if it risks their relationship.
He's putting the big picture first.
Exactly, putting the lives of people first.
Which brings us back to the human cost of these conflicts.
Right.
Woodward really brings that home, the impact on everyday people.
Israelis and Palestinians, both sides.
It's easy to forget that when you're talking about geopolitics and strategy.
It's about people.
Real people.
He tells the story about Abigail Eden, a 4-year-old Israeli girl held hostage by Hamas.
Oh my gosh.
Her parents, they were killed right in front of her.
Horrible.
And she's taken captive. Can you imagine the terror?
A 4-year-old?
Her story is just one of many.
Thousands of families going through the same thing.
It reminds you what's at stake.
The real cost of war.
And it's not just them. Millions of people around the world watching this unfold, feeling horrified, helpless, anxious.
Yeah, it's hard to escape it.
It really is, especially with everything else going on. Climate change, pandemics, the economy.
It's a lot.
And then, in the middle of all of this, you've got Trump.
Still working.
A powerful force in American politics, even out of office.
His shadow's still there.
He's talking about running again in 2024.
Which throws a wrench in everything.
World leaders are watching, wondering what's going to happen.
Is he going to come back and undo everything?
It creates a lot of uncertainty.
So Trump, even out of office, he's a wild card.
Absolutely, a big one. And he's constantly criticizing Biden's foreign policy.
Especially on Ukraine.
Which makes things even more complicated.
For Biden.
Yeah, trying to manage these international crises.
While dealing with all that noise.
From Trump and his supporters.
It's got to be frustrating.
To say the least.
So it highlights those deep divisions in American society.
Which, by the way, Russia and China, they're taking advantage of that.
They see an opportunity
To undermine American credibility.
to weaken us.
Exactly.
Let's shift gears a bit, talk about Biden's health and leadership.
Okay.
He's already one of the oldest presidents.
Yeah, when he took office, there were a lot of questions.
Can he handle it? Does he have the stamina? What about his mental sharpness?
Those questions were amplified by some of his public appearances.
The gaffes, the stumbles.
Sometimes his speech is a little halting.
Right, people remember that time he called Zelensky President Putin?
At a NATO summit,
Oops.
his critics used those moments to question his fitness for office.
Fair enough.
But Woodward gives us a more complete picture based on what people who work with him say.
The inside scoop.
Blinken, for example, describes him as sharp, engaged, very knowledgeable about the issues.
Okay, so he's still got it.
They admit he has his moments, but they insist he's fully capable.
So there's a difference between the public perception and the reality.
That happens a lot with presidents.
People only see the curated version,
Right, and Woodward also talks about how the presidency has affected Biden personally.
especially the issues with his son, Hunter,
That was a constant source of stress for him.
and a political liability.
The Republicans used it to attack him.
A reminder that presidents are human too.
They have families, they have personal struggles.
It all takes a toll.
But shifting back to the professional side, how did Biden's team function?
Yeah, what was the dynamic like?
Woodward emphasizes the importance of debate within the administration.
So not just a bunch of yes men.
No, Biden wanted people to challenge him,
Push back against his ideas,
to present different perspectives.
which is crucial for good decision making.
Absolutely, especially in a crisis.
If everyone's just agreeing all the time, that's when you get bad decisions.
Groupthink, it's dangerous.
Woodward gives examples of these debates playing out.
Like the disagreements about how to handle Netanyahu's ground invasion plans,
Some wanted Biden to be more forceful.
while others worried about damaging the relationship. Biden found a way to balance those concerns,
To find a middle ground.
expressing his concerns while still supporting Israel's security.
So he's a pragmatist.
He is. He's willing to compromise to make those hard choices.
But he's also guided by his values.
Democracy, human rights, the rule of law.
And those values shape his foreign policy.
He sees America's role as a champion for those values.
A defender of the international order.
And a leader in tackling global challenges
Climate change.
and pandemics.
So it's a blend of pragmatism and idealism.
Realism and hope.
That's the 21st century for you.
It's a complex.
But we can't forget about Trump lurking in the background.
His presence, it creates this sense of instability.
Both here and abroad.
World leaders don't know what to expect.
What if he comes back?
It emboldens our adversaries, too.
Like Putin.
He sees an opportunity to exploit our divisions.
To test Biden.
And it makes it harder for Biden to build consensus on foreign policy.
Because some in Congress are afraid of Trump.
They don't want to be attacked by him.
It's a reminder that domestic politics can really mess things up internationally.
When a country's divided, it's weaker.
And weakness invites aggression.
That's the danger we face.
Okay, we've talked about the challenges, the shadow of Trump, the human cost.
Let's dig a little deeper into the people involved.
What does Woodward reveal about their inner lives, their motivations?
He's great at getting past that public persona.
The carefully crafted image.
Right. With Biden, we see glimpses of a man who's experienced both triumph and tragedy.
Loss, grief.
The loss of his first wife and daughter, then his son, Beau.
It's shaped him.
Absolutely. Woodward suggests that it's giving him a deep empathy for others,
And an understanding of suffering.
a profound sense of how precious life is.
It's not just about personal loss, though.
He also talks about Biden's stutter,
That he's struggled with his whole life.
a constant challenge.
It's a reminder that even presidents are human.
They have vulnerabilities, struggles, moments of doubt.
It humanizes them.
It makes leadership more relatable.
Yeah, real.
And it reminds you that leadership isn't just about power, it's about those human qualities. Vulnerability, empathy, connection.
Makes sense.
Now with Trump, Woodward focuses more on that public persona,
The image, the status,
his transactional approach to relationships.
like we talked about earlier.
It's all about what you can do for him.
It seems like he's always seeking validation.
Always craving attention, and he lashes out at anyone who criticizes him.
That thin skin.
And he surrounds himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear,
Yes, man.
which can be really dangerous.
Especially for a president.
It creates an echo chamber. Bad decisions happen because no one's willing to challenge him.
And Woodward delves into Trump's psychology, too.
He suggests that Trump is driven by this need for affirmation
To be loved, to be admired.
and a fear of failure, deep insecurity that comes out as aggression and bravado,
It's a fascinating portrait.
but also disturbing.
Yeah.
A man who wasn't ready for the job
And who caused a lot of damage.
to American politics. And his influence is still felt today.
His style, his ideas,
That populist nationalism has spread around the world.
and his attacks on democracy.
They've emboldened authoritarians everywhere.
So the damage can outlast the leader.
A scary thought.
It makes you wonder, how strong are our institutions? Can they withstand these attacks?
Big questions.
Okay, we've looked at the personal side of these presidents, their motivations, their vulnerability.
How their personalities affect their leadership.
But let's zoom in on a theme that runs through Woodward's book.
The tension between diplomacy and military power.
That age-old question. Talk and fight.
When do you negotiate? When do you use force?
A classic dilemma.
Biden and Trump, they both faced it.
But in different ways.
Biden, he came into office believing in diplomacy.
Years in the Senate, building relationships.
He saw it as the best option.
The first resort.
And he was hesitant to use military force.
Unless absolutely necessary.
But he's not naive.
He knows diplomacy doesn't always work.
Sometimes you gotta fight.
To protect your interests, your allies.
And we see that in his response to Ukraine.
Initially resisting direct military intervention.
But providing support.
Weapons, money, intelligence,
And building that international pressure on Russia.
sanctions, diplomatic isolation.
It was a risk, but it worked.
Ukraine's holding on.
And the West is united.
But it also required restraint from the U.S. military
Some wanted to do more.
to get more involved.
But Biden knew the risks of escalation were too high.
A direct conflict with Russia,
Could be catastrophic.
potentially nuclear.
So, yeah, a delicate balancing act.
Support without provoking.
Every president faces this.
Now, Trump's approach to diplomacy,
He was much more skeptical.
he saw it as weakness.
He thought the U.S. should project strength, dominance.
America first,
And he acted accordingly.
withdrawing from agreements,
Alienating allies.
exerting force.
Diplomacy was a zero-sum game to him.
One winner, one loser.
He didn't get the idea of compromise.
Or building relationships.
And that approach often backfired.
He had some short-term wins.
Like the Abraham Accords.
But overall, his foreign policy did more harm than good.
Damaged America's reputation.
Weakened alliances.
And emboldened our adversaries.
It's a reminder that diplomacy is about more than just making deals.
It's about trust, cooperation, finding common ground.
And understanding that we're all connected.
What happens in one part of the world affects everyone.
That's the reality of the 21st century.
We need leaders who get that.
Who are willing to engage in diplomacy.
Patiently, persistently.
And who are committed to working with other countries.
To solve those shared challenges.
Okay, we've talked about diplomacy, the different approaches, the challenges of leadership.
But let's focus on one specific aspect of leadership.
Communication.
How presidents use it to shape the narrative, rally support, project strength, build trust.
It's crucial, especially during a crisis.
And Biden and Trump, they had very different styles.
Biden, he's got that folksy charm.
He connects with people.
He's not a great orator, but he's a good storyteller.
He can explain complicated stuff in a way that people understand.
And he comes across as authentic.
Empathetic.
People believe he cares.
That he's trying to do the right thing.
And that's important.
Especially when people are scared, uncertain.
They want to feel like their leader gets it.
That they have a plan.
Now, Trump, he was a media master.
He knew how to use social media.
To bypass the traditional media.
To speak directly to his base.
He was great at sound bites.
Dominating the news cycle.
But his style was often divisive.
Inflammatory.
He attacked his opponents constantly.
Spread misinformation.
He often seemed more interested in himself than in informing the public.
And that had a corrosive effect on our democracy.
Undermined trust.
Deepened divisions.
Made it harder to have a real conversation about the issues.
It's a cautionary tale.
Words matter.
They have power.
They can unite or divide.
Inform or mislead.
Inspire or incite.
Leaders need to be mindful of that.
Absolutely. And speaking of important qualities, let's talk about trust.
How do presidents build trust with the public, with their allies, with their enemies?
It's got to be a tough job.
It is. It's a complex process, a combination of factors.
Honesty, integrity, those are essential.
People need to believe their leaders are truthful, ethical.
Otherwise, why would they trust them?
And competence is important too.
They need to know what they're doing.
Be able to handle the challenges.
And consistency.
Saying one thing and doing another, that destroys trust.
Makes you look unreliable.
In Biden's case, I think his experience, his reputation for decency, his empathy, those have all helped him build trust.
He's seen as a good guy.
And that's been crucial for him.
In navigating these crises.
Domestically and internationally.
Now with Trump.
It was the opposite, a lack of trust.
He was constantly attacking institutions.
Undermining democracy.
Spreading misinformation.
He didn't seem to care about the truth.
And he was caught lying so many times.
It destroyed people's trust in him.
Made it harder for him to lead.
To unite the country.
And it hurt America's image in the world.
When the leader of the free world is untrustworthy,
it reflects on everyone.
It undermines the whole country.
So, trust is fundamental.
It's the foundation of leadership.
Without it, you can't build relationships, inspire confidence, achieve success.
It all falls apart.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this part of our deep dive.
The Israel-Gaza conflict, the challenges of leadership, the importance of communication and trust.
The different styles of Biden and Trump.
And as we move on to the final part,
right,
it's important to think about the bigger implications of all of this.
What does it say about the world we live in? The future of democracy.
What can we do as individuals, as a society?
To create a better world.
More peaceful, more just, more sustainable.
Big questions.
But important ones.
We've been talking about global events and the leaders at the center of it all.
Yeah, some pretty intense stuff.
And as we wrap up our look at war by Bob Woodward,
right,
I keep coming back to this idea of trust.
It's essential.
You said it's crucial for leadership, but it feels like trust is in short supply these days.
Oh, it's definitely fragile.
Not just in the U.S., but globally.
It's been eroding for years. You see it everywhere.
Where do you see it?
Declining faith in institutions, the rise of polarization, the spread of misinformation.
So much information out there.
It's hard to know what to believe.
Exactly. And people are cynical about government, about those in power.
It's understandable, but it's a problem.
Why is that?
Because this erosion of trust, it has consequences.
Like what?
It makes it harder to solve problems,
Makes
to
sense
make
there.
progress on the big issues,
Yeah, yeah.
to build a better world, a more stable world.
Right, so it's not just about feeling good.
It's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling.
It actually affects our ability to function as a society.
Absolutely. When people don't trust each other, their institutions, their leaders,
What happens?
it creates fear, suspicion.
And that can be dangerous.
It's like fuel for the fire.
Yeah.
Think about what Putin's been doing.
Oh, yeah, the master of distrust.
Spreading disinformation, meddling in elections, supporting extremists.
Trying to weaken the West.
He loves chaos. He wants to see us divided.
The rebuilding trust. It's not just some feel-good thing.
It's essential for our democracy.
And for tackling those global challenges,
Climate change, pandemics, you name it.
we need to work together.
And that requires trust.
But how do we even start?
And a world that feels so broken.
So cynical.
Yeah, it's tough, but I think it starts with truth.
Honesty.
Transparency. Leaders need to be straight with people.
Even when it's hard.
Admit their mistakes, take
Be
responsibility.
held accountable.
And it's not just leaders.
It's all of us.
We need to be smarter about the information we consume,
Be more critical.
especially online.
So much stuff out there.
And be willing to have those tough conversations.
With people who disagree with us.
Listen to each other, try to understand.
Trust is a two-way street.
It's about giving and receiving.
Makes sense.
Woodward's book also makes you wonder about America's role in the world.
Right. After Trump, after Afghanistan.
All the political fighting here at home.
Can we still be a leader?
Can the U.S. still credibly claim that mantle?
Yeah, a lot of people are asking that question.
Here and abroad.
So what's the answer?
I think it depends
On
on whether we can fix ourselves,
heal the divisions.
restore faith in our institutions.
Show the world we're still committed to democracy.
If we can do that, then yes, I think America can still lead.
But if we keep going down this path,
Of division, dysfunction,
ignoring the rule of law,
we risk losing everything.
and what happens then?
Other countries will fill the void.
China, Russia.
They're waiting in the wings.
That's a scary thought.
It would be a tragedy for us, for the world.
Okay, as we finish up our look at war,
What's the main takeaway?
what do you want listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. We're at a crossroads,
A turning point.
a time of uncertainty, danger, but also opportunity.
The choices we make now,
They'll determine the future.
will we give in to fear, division, authoritarianism,
Or will we choose a different path?
reaffirm our values,
Democracy, human rights,
work together to build a better world?
a more peaceful world, a more just world.
Big questions.
But we have to ask them.
Woodward's book, it doesn't give us all the answers.
But it does give us a look behind the scenes.
Into the halls of power.
To see the people, the decisions, the forces shaping our world,
It's a reminder that history is made by people,
not by abstract forces.
real people, with all their flaws, complexities, hopes, and fears,
And in the end, it's up to us.
to decide what kind of world we want.
Yeah, we have the power.
So let's choose wisely.
I like that. Choose wisely.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive into war.
It's been a journey.
We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking.
Keep asking questions.
Keep exploring, keep learning.
The world needs more of that.
And until next time,
Stay curious.
stay curious.